Is Easter actually a form of pagan worship? This is our third video in the series on this topic. And today we are diving into the name Easter itself. What does the word really mean? Where did it originate? And is there actually a pagan link to the name? I am going to try and give you some clear answers to all of that in this video. Before we get into it, we need to be clear on what Easter actually represents. In Greek and Latin, it's called Pascha. Easter is a celebration of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And I would like to think that any Pentecostal or Protestant with a bit of common sense wouldn't try to claim that the resurrection itself is tied to a pagan goddess. The reality is, the roots of Easter are deeply embedded in the Jewish Passover. So, what exactly is Passover? It is the commemoration of the people of Israel being freed from slavery in Egypt. When 10 plagues hit Egypt, and as part of the 10th plague, the firstborn of the Egypt were killed. But God protected the homes of Israelites. Basically, He passed over them. This festival lasts 7 days and kicks off on the 14th of Jewish month Nisan. Look at the Bible, you will see Jesus celebrating Passover with His disciples, which we know as the Last Supper. It was right after this Passover feast that Jesus was crucified and rose again on the third day. In short, it is pretty clear from all this that the roots of this celebration and the date it's held have absolutely nothing to do with anything pagan. So where does all the confusion come from? It all revolves around the English word Easter. Let's take a closer look at that. We know that Christians have been celebrating this feast since the first century. But back then, the word Easter didn't even exist. Why? Because the English language itself didn't exist back then. So, what did the early Christians call it? In Greek and Latin, it was known as Pascha. This word, Pascha, was derived from Hebrew word Sach. And honestly, most languages around the world still use that same name today, Pascha. Take this for example. It's Pasqua in Spanish, Pasqua in Italian, and Pacas in French. Some languages like Romanian use words that literally mean resurrection. Basically, with the exception of English and German, almost every European language still refers to it as Pascha or Passover. My point in telling you all this is to prove that the original name of this feast isn't Easter. Easter is just a term that popped up in the English language after the 6th century. The terms Easter and Eostre appear in the English and German sources from around the 8th century. Now, is Easter actually the name of some pagan goddess? This is where the debate usually starts. Some people claim that because the names like Eostre or Ishtar sounds like Easter, the holiday must have come from a pagan deity. This whole idea was popularized back in the 19th century by Alexander Hislop in his book The Two Babylons. But as you know, we have completely debunked those two claims apart in our previous videos. The reality is, there isn't a shred of historical or linguistic evidence for any of this. Hislop's entire logic boils down to these words sound alike. But if we follow that logic, doesn't the name Esther in the Bible sound just as similar? Does that mean that we are going to start calling Esther a pagan goddess too? Of course not. To my Pentecostal friends, I have warned you about this before. When you start pushing these kinds of ridiculous arguments, you are just giving atheists and Islamists an excuse to attack the Bible and claim that the Book of Esther has pagan roots. In any language, you'll find words that sounds alike but mean totally different things. Take hospital, hostel, hotel. All these words share the same linguistic root. But when you have a word like hostile, it sounds similar, right? But its root and meaning have absolutely nothing to do with the others. Hostel and hostile might sound similar, but they come from different places and mean the exact opposite. It's also worth noting that Ralph Woodrow, someone who originally promoted Hislop's ideas, eventually realized he was wrong and pulled his book from shelves. Woodrow gave a great example. The McDonald's logo is an arch. Does that make McDonald's a Babylonian religion? That's how ridiculous it is. to try and link Easter to Ishtar. The truth is, the words Easter in English or Oster in German actually just mean Passover season. If you want proof, just look at older Bible translations. In Martin Luther's 16th century German Bible, and even in the famous KJV Bible, the word Easter is used as a perfect synonym for Passover. To my Pentecostal and Protestant friends who keep pushing this pagan theory, why don't you just open up your own KJV Bible and take a look? In Acts 12:4, it talks about Herod arresting Peter and planning to bring him out after the Passover. But the word KJV actually uses there is Easter. This proves that even back in the 16th century, Easter was simply the English word for Passover. It was never the name of some pagan deity. So where does the name Easter actually come from? We find the answer in the writings of Venerable Bede, a 7th century historian and a Catholic priest. Back then, the Anglo-Saxon calendar had a month called Eostre, which is basically our April. Since the resurrection was usually celebrated in that month, the name of the month eventually became the name of the holiday itself. That's exactly how the Feast of Resurrection turned into Easter in English. But the real question is, how did the month get its name? The explanation Bede gives is that once upon a time, there was a goddess named Eostre, and the month was named after her. But most of the modern historians don't put much stock in that theory. The reason historians are skeptical is that outside of Bede's writing, there isn't a single mention of this goddess Eostre in all of history. What did she look like? Who were her followers? When exactly was she worshipped? We have zero records or evidence to back them up. That's why most historians believe his explanation was either based on some legend he had heard or was simply his own personal theory. There is actually a much more likely reason that the month had that name. According to linguistic studies, the word Eostre is directly linked to the word east. Because of this, many scholars believe that the name actually comes from the concept of dawn, linking back to the ancient roots, the Greek Eos or even the Sanskrit Ushas. Another theory is that the name was just a regional identity, basically meaning those in the east of England. But look, these are all just theories. The most likely connection is to the word east itself. Think about it. This is the month of equinox, the time of the year that the sun rises exactly in the east. That's probably why the month was called Ishtar in the first place. At the end of the day, while people can still debate where the month's name came from, the conclusion is simple. The holiday is called Easter only because it happened to fall in that specific month, Ishtar. It has absolutely nothing to do with worshipping a pagan goddess.